Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to our session here, 100% participation. I see you all are logging in. We'll get started at the top of the hour. While you're waiting, please type your name and where you're from in the chat box. We'd like to know who's here. We'll get started soon. Good morning to those of you who just joined us. We'll get started soon, but please introduce yourself in the chat box. We love to know who's here. Good morning, Beth. Hi, Rita. Hi, Sherry. Welcome, Laura and Francis and Patrick and Jennifer. Hi, Malika and Flora. Thank you guys for being here. Hi, Sue. Some familiar faces here. Hi, Sharon. All right, it's 11 o'clock. Let's get started. Thank you for being here. My name is Jamie Harris. I'm an adult education program specialist at the Maryland Department of Labor, and I would love, and I'm happy, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this BTI session today. And before we jump in and Tiffani Ross takes it away and shares incredible content, I have a couple requests for you. First, as you engage in the chat box, make sure you've chosen panelists and attendees so everyone can see your comments. Secondly, I'm going to launch a poll. We'd like to know who's in the room, what your role is. So please indicate your role in adult education. I'll give you a few seconds to respond. Okay. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome. All right, let's end this poll in 3, 2, 1. And share the results. So Tiffani, it looks like we have a lot of ESL instructors. We also have ABE instructors, instructional specialists, other program leaders, staff, and other. So thank you all for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to Tiffani to take it away. Tiffani, it's all yours.
Thank you, Miss Jamie, and welcome everybody. If I were in the classroom right now, we would start with celebrate. This is how we start all of our classes, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here to 100% participation, creating a culture of engagement in the adult classroom. My name is Tiffani Ross, and I was telling Jamie, I'm so nerve-sighted to be here, a combination of nervous and excited. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope, great word, right? I love it too, nerve-sighted. Thank you all for joining me. I hope that today's workshop will be an opportunity for you to reflect on engagement, and that we can all be teachers and students in this experience. Thank you for engaging in the chat so far. And let's keep that energy going throughout this presentation. Welcome to you all. Thank you again for being here. Again, my name is Tiffani Ross. I have been in the education field for the past 15 years. I am currently an adult ESOL educator and have been specifically an adult ESOL for the past 5 years. But prior to doing that, I worked with nonprofits, I did train the trainers, managed programs, and was also a preschool teacher. So education has been close to my heart, which also guided me to become a certified leadership coach. So all of those experiences over the past 15 years, I'm bringing together today in this presentation with you. So I'll start with a question for you. And we can write in the chat and say, yes, me, okay, if you have had this experience before. Have you ever asked a question to your class, asked for a volunteer, and this is the response that you get? Maybe some blank stares. Yes, definitely. Yes, yes. Capital letters, exclamation points. Absolutely, right? this was my biggest fear going into the online classroom. How do I take this energetic, in-person, amazing classroom culture that we've created where students are engaging, they're showing up, and how do I transition that into the online platform where we're not just existing in a classroom together anymore, where we have more control over the culture. We're all in our own homes, at work, on the bus, dealing with children, dealing with family needs, many pulls to our attention. I really was fearful of how I would maintain that culture. And I struggled at the beginning of this transition, as many of us have, as evident in the chat. And, and so I really had to lean on my experience as an educator. I had to lean on the basics that I was teaching my new trainers and facilitators around creating an engaging environment. I had to lean on my leadership coaching and coach myself and remind myself that as a teacher making this transition to online learning, I am responsible for setting the tone, for setting the culture, and for leading my students through this new experience. And I had to pull all of that knowledge and that information together to create engaging classroom environments. And that's what I'll be sharing with you today, some of those nuggets that I've gained. And I hope that you too will contribute to this conversation and share your knowledge and experiences so we can all learn from each other's experiences. By the end of today's workshop, together we will define, together and for ourselves, classroom culture and what that means. And what are the markers for engagement in our classrooms? We'll reflect on our current level of participation and engagement in our classrooms so that we know where we are and where we want to go as educators. And then we'll identify engagement strategies. These are some of my favorite promising practices around engagement in the classroom. And I ask that you will, throughout the presentation, share yours as well, so that we can all walk away with a toolbox of strategies and daily practices for reinforcing a culture of engagement every day in our classes. If you're on board with being a part of this journey and being a contributor to this space, please type yes in the chat. I look forward to all of you joining us. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Maxine. Whoa, you're so fast I can't see everybody. Thank you, Samantha, Comfort, Rita, everyone. Thank you. So there are various ways for you to engage today during today's presentation. I am going to share with you in the chat box a worksheet that I created to go along with this presentation. If you'll give me one moment, I'll continue to share my screen so that you can see an example of the worksheet. This worksheet is 100% participation to go along with the presentation today. So you can print this off and complete as we go, or you can feel free to fill it out at a later date. So I'm going to put this into the chat. Hopefully this works well. Let's see. Thank you in advance for your patience. Okay, so it looks like it's not letting me put the actual document in the chat, so I will share this. Here. Okay. So here's the link. Please let me know if you're able to click on that. You can follow along as we go. Again, you can use this during the presentation. You will see on various slides this icon. That means that the content that's being covered on the slide and that we'll be discussing is also on the worksheet. You can also engage as you're doing now so beautifully in the chat, where you can leave your questions, your answers. Permission required. Will do. Thank you, everyone. Give me 1 second. I will get you going so we're all on the same page. Okay. I will share my permission with everyone now. Okay, we should be in. If you could confirm that you're in, that would be fantastic. I see. Yay! I hope that means that we are in. Okay, fantastic. Thank you everyone for confirming. See, isn't this a beautiful example of all the stumbling blocks we have to go through as we make this transition into online learning? Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you for confirming. So yes, you can use this worksheet to follow along and to add your thoughts and ideas as we go. You can also utilize the chat function. So let's start by talking about what classroom culture is. There are so many definitions out there for classroom culture. So I invite you all to take a moment to think about what is classroom culture to you? What does that mean? You can add your ideas in the chat, or you could follow along on your worksheet and fill it out as we go. For me personally, I believe classroom culture is how your community engages. What are the customs and the practices that you establish every day in your class that establishes that unique identity for your classroom? It's our shared values. It's the safe learning container that we create for our students so they know they can enter this environment and it's a safe place for them to learn. I see here in the chat, it's community, it's a safe learning and engaging environment. It's how the class engages and participates, absolutely. And this workshop is all about a second family. Oh, I love that. I feel that one. Yes, I'm with you, Heather. So in this presentation, we're going to be talking about creating a culture of engagement. So you're showing beautiful examples of what culture is. Well, what is engagement in your classroom? What does student engagement look like in your classroom? What are the markers of engagement for you? There are many, many ways that engagement is measured, especially in the online space, from attendance to retention to test scores to emotional security. For the sake of this presentation, we're looking at engagement in terms of participation, student participation. So what are those markers of student participation for you? I see in the chat active participation, verbal interaction. Students are not afraid to speak out and make mistakes. Yes, high five to you, I'm with you. Students volunteer to read, share their grows and glows. What are they working on, hoping to improve? What they succeeded in, what they are proud of. Attendance as much as possible, right? And we know with adult learners, they're navigating a lot of different things in their lives, from work to school to transportation to and from wherever their designated learning spaces. So there are a lot of barriers that our students are facing. Absolutely. So to me, along with these brilliant ideas you're sharing in the chat, it's attending class. It's having cameras on, which I know can be a huge struggle and an easy way for our students to disengage by turning those cameras off. So we'll talk a little bit today about how I create a camera on culture in my classroom. These raised hands, interacting through Zoom, a willingness to respond when they're asked a question, working and collaborating with their peers, asking questions when they don't know. Great, I see rooting for each other to do well. I love this. So let's take a minute to think about our classrooms, or if you're an instructor, maybe the classrooms that you have observed within your organization. I am a coach, so there's going to be a coaching lens that comes with this. And a part of that is the willingness to reflect on where we currently are. Let's reflect on the engagement that we have in our classrooms now so that we can start thinking about where we want to go. So in a moment, Ms. Jamie will be launching a poll for you to rate your class's average overall engagement on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being minimal participation, 10 being 100% participation. As you're thinking about this, know that this isn't a space for you to judge yourself or to be hard on yourself. This is really an opportunity for us as educators to just see where we are with our students' engagement. So I invite you now, the poll is up. On a scale of 10, can you rate your class's average overall engagement? And if you have a difficult time seeing the poll, please let us know. You can click. Can you see the poll? Is it live?
It is, yes. And quite a few people have responded. I guess I'll give
Oh,
a minute for it to
I
complete and
see.
then I'll share the results.
Oh, no, thank you, because I can't see if anyone's voting on my end. So thank you. Hey, so thank you so much, Miss Jamie, and we'll see where we are. So we are seeing that the majority of the group is sitting around an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10 around participation. But as a community, we're ranging from a 3 to a 10 as far as engagement is concerned. So again, this isn't for us to judge ourselves or to get upset or disappointed. It's just for us to, yeah, it is a decent range. I agree. It's an opportunity for us to see where we are and how we can learn and contribute, and where we can take our students. So now that we see where we are, let's take a moment to think about where we go. This idea of beginning with the end in mind. As educators, as teachers in our classrooms, we are the leaders. And so thinking like a leader as a teacher or an instructional coach or what have you, it's really important that we establish a vision for our people, for our community. So we'll take a moment here to start reflecting on what that vision of a culture of engagement, engaged and participating students looks like for us. So you'll find these questions on the worksheet. We may not go through all of them now, but this is just to start generating your thinking around what is the vision for my classroom. Some questions to reflect on when you're thinking about the vision for your classroom. What 3 words would you want your students to use to describe your classroom culture? You can feel free to drop in the chat. I'm going to go through about 4 different questions. You can answer the one that resonates with you the most as we go. For me, I want my students to feel like our classroom is safe, like it's engaging, it's exciting. I see stimulating, participatory, equal, safe, fun-loving, comforting, informative. I see when someone's asking about what worksheet. If you scroll up further into the chat, you will see a link to a Google document. This is the worksheet that we're using along with today's workshop. Safe, engaging, and fun. High energy. These are beautiful. Great. So I see engaging keeps popping up again and again. Engaging, helpful, safe. Yes. So holding this vision of how you want your students to be able to describe your classroom culture is an opportunity for us to start with the end and work backwards. So we'll talk about how we do that a little bit today. Great. Another question that you can reflect on as you're considering the vision for your classroom. Yes, I will. Oh, thank you, Jamie, for dropping the link again. Fantastic. How do you want to see your students interacting with each other? When you were sharing earlier about what classroom culture is, it was how we engage, how we interact with one another. So how do you want to see your students interacting? I see encouraging each other. Are they collaborative? With respect and support, supportive, with respect and supporting each other, right? Openly, teamwork, right? I'm definitely detecting some themes here. Next question. How do you want your students to feel Right? Our students come to our classrooms because there's material that they want to learn, there's a skill that they want to gain, but they continue to come because of you. They continue to come because of their classmates. They continue to come because of how they feel when they're in your class and when they're leaving your class. So, what is your vision? How do you want? My heart's like racing on this one because I just feel this. How do you want your students to feel when they leave their class? Important, confident, empowered, satisfied, appreciated, and cared for. Wonderful. And another question for you to reflect on. I want them to know Miss Karen and care about their professional and personal interests. Yes. I love you guys so much. And the final question to reflect on is why will they want to return to your class every day? So we're dealing with adult learners. It's so easy to check out of online classes, to disengage, to disconnect. Busy lives, jobs, transportation issues, getting to and from work before you can even get to class. Why would your students want to even come to class every day? This is going to be an important part of their engagement and their willingness to show up and participate. I see some great results in the chat. They want to anticipate the new learning opportunities. They learn more to enhance and enjoy a new, refreshed learning experience, a success and a sense of belonging. Great. So those of you who are sharing on the chat, I hope you are also capturing this for yourselves because this is the vision that you're creating as a leader of your classroom. And it's great to have it inside of our hearts and inside of our heads, but actually get it out on paper in front of us as the North Star that we're moving towards in our classroom can be such a powerful experience for us and a guide for us as we move forward, even as we transition back into the in-person classrooms. Great. So we've looked at where our students currently are. We're establishing this vision around what we want our classroom to be, what a culture of engagement looks like, why our students will show up in class. So how do we establish this culture? In my experience as an educator, as a trainer, as a coach, I believe there are three really important items and things to consider when we're establishing a culture of engagement. One is establishing that culture early. So establishing within the first 1, 2, 3 days of class, what our classroom culture is and embodying that culture as early as possible in the process. Also, number two, the establishment of a culture of engagement, I believe, is best served when it's collaborative. When we as the educators aren't just coming in saying, this is how our classroom is, this is our culture, this is how we operate. We can come with the vision and ideas, but it's so much more effective and empowering when we create that culture collaboratively with our students. And the third, that our culture of engagement is reinforced daily. So even if we establish this culture and expectations around our culture in our classrooms the first 2, 3 days, and the students helped us, it means very little if we're not continuing to carry this culture throughout our time together with our students. So throughout this presentation, we're going to explore different techniques that I've used for establishing a culture of engagement, to make that a collaborative experience, and different techniques and strategies I use daily to reinforce a culture of engagement and high participation in the classroom. You have already shown that you are brilliant educators with beautiful minds and ideas. So please, as we work through this presentation, share your ideas, ask your questions to the group, so that we can share our knowledge. I always tell my students, we are all students, we are all teachers. We all have something to learn and something to contribute. And I would love for us to embody that in our chat section here during this presentation. And thank you in advance. So here are some of the things that I do early on to establish a culture of participation and high engagement in my classroom. First is to create a camera on expectation. I know, the cameras. It's so easy for our students to check out of the classroom. Um, and so establishing a camera on culture earlier in right away in your classroom, I found to be very effective. So there are three main ways that I do that with my students. And I just want to be clear, my students, 95 to 100% of them have their cameras on every class. And this is how we do this. One is teaching the students the camera basics of your platform. In all of my classes, I use Zoom. And so teaching them how to turn the camera on and off um, is basic and essential. I also talk to my students the first couple of days of class about lighting and how to create nice lighting for yourself when you're on camera. This just shows that this is an important element of our class, that it's something that's valued and it matters. And the students then are equipped with the baseline skills to show up on camera more comfortably. I also hold discussions with my students about the benefits. I ask my students, what do you think the benefit is of you having the camera on during class? And I'm receiving these answers from them. And I also share from my perspective as the teacher, the benefits of being able to see my students. I can see when you're understanding something. I can see if you're confused. It brings me great joy to be able to see your smiling faces every day. I share with my students why I love to have them on camera and how that benefits our environment and culture. And the third is to notify my students when I can't see them. So sometimes the students have their cameras off and they don't even know it. So if I have a student in class, we came back from a breakout group. Oh, hi, Carlos. Welcome back to class. I can't see you, just so you know. So if you're able to turn your camera on, please do. And that really works well for my class. Again, we typically have 95 to 100% of my students with their cameras on every class. Feel free to drop in the chat how camera on culture is working in your classroom, if any of these techniques are helpful, or if you have other ones that you utilize with your students. Another way that I establish a culture of engagement is that I co-create guidelines for engagement or class rules with my student and share class mottos. So you may be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this is often used in psychology to talk about the motivations and the basic needs of people. And it starts at the base with the psychological needs of food, water, shelter, and moves up to self-actualization, where we're really becoming the best version of ourselves that we can be. And these elements are essential to creating an engaging and meaningful classroom environment. I'd like to draw your attention specifically to the orange and yellow, the idea of safety and the idea of love and belonging. And many of you have already referenced this when you were sharing what kind of classroom environment you want to create for your students, what kind of culture you want, where they feel safe, right? To be in the classroom and be able to make mistakes and to learn and to share their ideas. And to also feel a sense of, this is my classroom, I belong here, I'm welcomed here, are so essential to allowing our students to get to the next level in this hierarchy of needs, of esteem, feeling like they are capable and able, that they can show up and develop the skill. So two really important ways of doing that are co-creating those guidelines for engagement. And I found class mottos to be really effective in creating safety and belonging in our classroom. So here's an example of one of the mottos I shared with you earlier. We are all students, we are all teachers. I repeat this to my students on a daily basis, just to show that we're really valuing the contributions our students are making, and that we all have something to teach and we all have something to learn during our time together. And I found that this really empowers and inspires my students. If you have mottos that you use in your classroom on a regular basis, please share them in the chat as inspiration. Another motto, I think this is the favorite amongst my students. I teach ESOL primarily with beginners and intermediate students. And so there is a lot of fear around making mistakes and not speaking English perfectly, which is not going to happen if you're just learning the new language. So I tell my students, correct is okay, not correct is okay. And I do this before we volunteer to answer, before we review a worksheet. It really emphasizes that the most important part is that you try. And that's what we value more than correct answers in the classroom. I see another motto here in the group from Beth. The more you do, the more you can do. Ah, fantastic. Wonderful. Crash and burn. Yes, Susan, it's bold and exciting, but make sure that it is a beautiful explosion with lots of vibrant colors. I love it. So creating mottos, becomes a calling card in your classroom. It reinforces that culture that you're creating with your students. I had my students do a reflection just last week as we were ending our semester at CASA, which is one of the organizations I work for. And my student wrote like 3 paragraphs all about correct is okay, not correct is okay, and how that made him feel like he could make mistakes and that no one was going to make fun of him and it was going to be safe to make mistakes in the classroom. Which made me cry. But it's just beautiful to know that we are establishing that culture of safety and belonging in our classes. So along with classroom mottos, establishing guidelines for engagement or your rules for your classroom. So I do this with my students during our first 1 or 2 days of class. And so this is an actual question that I posed to my students. I had them copy this question down, and then they went into small breakout rooms on Zoom and discussed their answers to this question with their classmates, came back and shared out with the whole group. So I asked my students, what rules should we have to make our class a positive and safe community for everyone to learn? So as the students are sharing their responses, what they're really sharing is their needs and their fears as learners. So if someone says, don't make fun of your classmates, they're voicing their concern around being made fun of in the classroom environment, and they can feel empowered by sharing that and that becoming a rule or a way that we engage as a community. So it's really an opportunity for you to hear the needs of your students and also create safety for them. So here are some examples from a recent class that I had. As you can see in our classroom rules or guidelines for engagement, I started with our classroom mottos because I want that to be something that becomes ingrained and an essential part of our classroom culture. And then some of these others are actual rules and guidelines that my intermediate students wanted to have in our class. Great idea doing this next semester. Yes, Stephanie, fantastic. I found it to be essential to how our classroom runs. At the end, I have my students write in the chat that they agree or they raise their hand or they sign off on it. And I show these rules that they've created at the beginning of every class for the first 1 or 2 weeks. And if we have issues in the class, I can always refer back to the classroom rules and guidelines that we've agreed upon as a community. So we talked about how we establish that culture of engagement and participation through guidelines, through mottos, right up front, excuse me, in our classroom. So let's talk a little bit about how we as educators can continuously reinforce a culture of engagement in our classrooms. I'll be sharing some of my tips and techniques and favorite ideas, and I invite you all to do the same in the chat. So my question to you, what strategies and daily practice do you use to promote student engagement and participation? So I'll give you a moment to think. You can post in the chat and share with others. I shared with at the beginning of the presentation for those who were there. In my class, we do something called celebrate. We all celebrate and we clap and we cheer, and we do that throughout our classroom experience and our time together. You have make sure all students are called upon throughout the class time. Every class, we start with a round circle or question chain, questions to start small talk. I am definitely downloading this chat at the end, so I have all these beautiful nuggets. Greet each student by name at point of class entry, regular discussion questions, greeting each participant as they come in, chat box, having them talk us through an exercise, taking turns talking, encouraging them to babble with each other. Wonderful. No, these are all amazing techniques that really engage the student and support that safety, sense of safety, a sense of belonging. I relate the material to their lives or ask follow-up questions about things I know they have going on. Patrice says, show a sincere interest in them. Right. Wonderful. So a lot of these are very heartfelt or they're very foundational, but it's so easy in our day-to-day lives, and especially through this huge transition we've made, an abrupt huge transition we've made to online learning, to forget some of these central elements that really make our class a safe, engaging space for our students. As Comfort says, a wellness check-in. Fantastic. So here are some of my favorites. The first way, my first strategy is to model engagement. We are the leaders of our classrooms and our students follow our leads. So if we are not excited, if we are not engaged, if we are not welcoming, if we are not embodying the mottos and the guidelines for engagement that we have set forth for our students, if we're not moving towards that vision consciously, then our students aren't either. Right, so modeling the engagement that we want to see from our students is such an essential part of promoting this 100% participation and creating a culture of engagement with our students in the classroom. So taking a moment before you enter class and to check our own energy. Where am I? How do I feel? What do I need before I enter this classroom so that I can be engaged and focused and at my best as an educator? Many of you already shared this idea of recognizing each student. And again, back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's reinforcing basic needs that we all as human beings have beyond food, water, shelter, protection. Right? It's a sense of love and belonging. So when a student enters the room and saying, hello, Rita, thank you for being here, making eye contact with our camera because we're not physically in that space, can be a powerful way of creating a sense of belonging for our students. Hello, Heather, welcome to class. I'm happy to see you. Hi, Susan, welcome. Right. These are a great way to help our students feel like they belong, like we see them, and them being in class with us matters to us as their teacher and to their classmates. I also sometimes have my students who have arrived at class earliest to be the greeter. And so I'll have Selma, you're the greeter today. Are you willing to say hello to all of your classmates as they enter? And they've really loved doing that with each other. It just furthers engagement and it furthers this sense of community. Another strategy that I use is varying the forms of engagement for my students. So we're dealing with a lot of different personality types. We're dealing with different energy levels, even previous educational wounds that our students have that may lead to fears around engagement. So I create different opportunities for the students to engage. So volunteers is a very basic way that we as teachers tend to engage our students. However, we know this doesn't work well for our more introverted students, more reserved students, for students who take a longer time processing the questions or the task at hand. So if we only relied on volunteers, we may be hearing from the same and engaging the same 5 students every class. So considering other ways beyond volunteering that we can engage our students. So students, call students is something that I do often in my class. So if we just like finished a worksheet and we're reviewing together as a class, for the first question, I may call on a volunteer to answer. So I'll say, oh, okay, volunteer. Okay, thank you, Susan. Susan answers number 1, and I invite Susan to call on a different student to answer question number 2. Right? The student who answers question 2 will call on another student to answer the next question. And this keeps our students on our toes. It's a way to engage everybody. And I also always go back to the motto before they answer the questions. Remember, correct is okay, not correct is okay. Polls is another great way if you're using Zoom in your classroom, like we just did when Miss Jamie launched the poll for us. This is an opportunity for our students to be anonymous. We can use that as formative assessment, or also just a way for our students to express their ideas or their understanding of the material. I love the Zoom reaction features. They've expanded those. You have the thumbs up, the surprise faces, the crying, laughing faces, the check marks and the X's. These are great opportunities to keep our students engaged. I personally use the thumbs up constantly in class as a way to see that my students are ready to continue to the next activity. So if we're copying notes or answering a question, I'll say, okay, and when you're finished, give me a thumbs up so I know you're ready to continue. This continuously promotes my students' engagement, even in small ways. Breakout rooms, utilizing those often so that the students have opportunities to collaborate with each other, and also the chat feature and Zoom. And please, if you have different ways that you engage your students on a day-to-day, please share in the chat. I see Mary has group text to connect learning during the week. Fantastic. Wonderful. Another way from day to day how I promote a culture of engagement and reinforce that culture that we're creating in our classroom is, as the educator, allow space for the awkward silence. This was the hardest thing for me to become comfortable with when I first started teaching and doing training and facilitation. As a culture, our American culture, we tend to fill in the quiet space with chatter. I know, Jennifer, silence is hard for me too. Yes, anyone else, is the awkward silence a little difficult? Right, but it's so essential because it gives our learners the time and space to process, and it shows them that the safest space. It shows them that the space is safe, and it gives them an opportunity to enter the space in their own time with their own comfort. So I know it's challenging, but I invite you to try, if you're not doing so yet, after you ask a question or for a volunteer in class, just wait. It can feel long and it can feel awkward, but it's an opportunity for our students to step forward. My students are so used to this. Sometimes I'll just put my hand on my chin, or my chin on my hand, and they know, okay, the teacher's gonna wait until we show up, which is just a great way to get them in the habit and the expectation of engaging. Another promising practice that I use in the classroom is to notice and affirm the culture and engagement. So when I see my students exhibiting some of our mottos, or they're living into the vision that we've created together for our class, when they're creating safe space for their other students, or being collaborative or showing teamwork, I celebrate that. I call that out. I affirm it. Again, our favorite thing to do in my class is celebrate. So when someone's answering a question, they finish answering the question, we celebrate. If someone makes a big mistake and then catches themselves and corrects it, we celebrate. If someone comes up to share and they freeze, we still celebrate them because we're saying thank you for showing up. Thank you for being a part of our culture. Thank you for your engagement. I have a question here from Nancy. Nancy, please hold on to that question. We'll get to a Q&A at the end. If I don't get to it, just repost it again. Thank you for that. Another technique that I like to use in my classroom is engagement challenges. And so this is something that I've just started trying within the last 6 months in class. Engagement challenges really revs up your competitive students. And I bring these to the class a couple times a week. So here's an example of a challenge. So in this one, this engagement challenge is a volunteer challenge. So at the beginning of class, as we get started, I tell my students, okay, your challenge today is to volunteer 3 times in class. And I give examples of different ways that they can volunteer. I do the buy-in, okay, who's going to accept today's challenge? Usually all the student raise their hands. And let me tell you, as soon as the first time I asked for volunteers in class, all of the hands shoot up because all of my students want to meet their challenge for the day and volunteer 3 times. So your challenges can be different things. Volunteer challenge is one idea. Another one is a vocabulary challenge. When I teach English to immigrants living here in the United States and abroad, and or English language learners from abroad. And so using that new vocabulary, encouraging them to use some of the words that really resonated with us or is really on theme with what we're talking about, or is a pronunciation challenge for many of my students, I'll pose a vocabulary challenge for them to use that word in the day. So your challenges can be anything, as long as it's around engagement and it's really encouraging your students to interact in new, varied, and different ways. And that was my last technique or tip. If you have a new one that you would like to add to the chat, please do. We can take some time now for any questions that you may have for me. And I do want to take a moment to send out some thank yous as we come towards the end of our time together. I wanted to say thank you to the Maryland Adult Education Virtual Training Institute for allowing me to be here, inviting me to participate. Thank you to Gina Davis, who is essential part of putting all of this together, and behind the scenes for those of us who are presenting, she's been a huge support. So I wanted to say thank you to her, and to all of you adult educators, specialists, all of you who are dedicated to this work as adult educators. This last year and a half has not been easy by any means, but we have shown up and we have adjusted and we have fallen down and gotten back up. And I just want to thank you all for your dedication to your students, and your willingness to show up like you have. I celebrate you. I see Miss
Tiffani, that was great.
Oh,
That
thank
was so
you.
good. For those of you who are here, we'll still leave it open so you can ask questions, but you'll notice that there are 2 links in the chat. One is for feedback. When you log out of the session, you'll also get an opportunity to do the feedback survey, but I've also placed the link in the chat so that you can shout out and celebrate the great work that Tiffani is doing with her learners. Secondly, you'll see a link for the proof of participation. We encourage you to complete that after you've attended all the Virtual Training Institute sessions that you plan to attend, and fill out 1 proof of participation. This is recorded, and so what that means is at the end of June, we hope to put the recordings of all the sessions from the VTI on the website, and that way you can check out the archive and look at this again and take notes again of some of the things that you've learned. So we're going to stay here for a moment, and Tiffany, you can check out the chat and interact with attendees as we wait for more questions.
Fantastic. So, Nancy, I'm coming back to you. What is your thought on going around and having everyone take turns participating? So, I personally love the idea of everyone coming taking turns participating in class. I'm my mind is so focused on online learning, so as I'm visualizing my response to this question, I just see a screen of different boxes of students and going through the boxes. If you mean going around having everyone participate, if you mean something else by that, please do let me know in the chat. But I think this is meaningful if you've already established your class as a safe learning environment where people can show up in this way, and that their responses, whether they're correct or they're incorrect, will be respected. So taking that time to establish that safe culture, creating those guidelines for engagement, modeling, um, and being explicit about your expectations for how students engage, that's going to create a safe environment for you to be able to then go around and have everyone participate. And I think taking the time to explain to your students that that's the approach that you're going to take, so that they can be a little bit prepared, because there are inevitably going to be some nerves around that with your students. So taking that time to create a safe environment, I think, is essential. Nancy, please let me know if that answers your question. See. I'm looking through the chat. If anyone has posted a question earlier, feel free to copy and paste that question down in the bottom, or you can post one on behalf of someone else that you may have seen earlier. Okay, thank you, Miss Nancy, for confirming. And yes, it looks like this chat will be shared with all of us, so we can get all this good, juicy, all these good, juicy nuggets there.
The chat won't, but the
Oh,
recording will. So
all
if
the
you guys
recordings.
see some
Okay.
ideas, jot them down from the chat.
Ah, I see. I see. Okay, let's see if there are any other questions. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions. Thank you all again for being here and all your kind words. Oh, I forgot one more slide. I'm sorry. I would love to stay in touch. So if you have any questions or you'd like to chat, participation, engagement, adult education, I am here for that all day, every day, except for on the weekends. So you can feel free to reach out to me at tiffanyrossx@gmail.com. And happy teaching to all of you. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the institute. Have a great day, everyone.